Couple of questions for you folks. Thank you so much for tuning in, by the way. The Garden Mama Show is all about you, all about your plants. Tell you what we're doing. We're going to talk about sunflowers here in a little bit because Lance is about to do a bunch of that. But the question is, what are you planting? What's in bloom at your house this week? This is the time of year when I really enjoy asking that question because the responses are so tremendous. Across my social media yesterday, I saw everything from dandelions to the biggest camellias you've ever seen in your life to people with stuff blooming in the house. So it's a really good time for gardeners to celebrate each other and appreciate one another for what all we're up to, which is a lot of different things at this time. There are many, many things you can be working on, and I do want to know what you're pruning. It is time. I have literally sharpened loppers twice, and I'm going to have to do it again, I think, because we have so many things that need pruning at this time of year. So what are you pruning? Where do you get your seeds? What do you like? If you get my newsletter, and I hope you do, you will be seeing some choices of mine. And we'll probably bring those to you next week. I'm going to get those seeds, and I think they'll come in this week. But there's a lot of things that you want to think about, and that's really what you're going to plant and how you're going to plant it. We've kind of covered about the hows. So let's talk a little bit more about the information that you've got access to. When we think about all of the seeds that you want to start for the spring garden right now, some of the things that we're talking about, of course, are going to be planted as soon as possible. That would be in the broccoli category and the cabbage category, and those if you might start some Swiss chard or something like that to get it out into the garden early. But you may also be growing along some tomatoes and peppers that you're not going to put into the garden for many, many weeks. You just need to get them growing so you've got nice, healthy plants to look at. I'm not sure what that plant was that just flashed by on the screen, but it looked like tractor seat. So we'll have to ask Peaches if that's what he sent us today. I don't have his list, but that's really pretty. It's either tractor seat or it's a begonia of some sort. I can't quite tell, but it's very striking. I like that. Good looking plant. When we go to buy seeds, of course, some of the things we're looking for are varieties that we recognize and others that we're willing to try because they either come from a source that we like or because, frankly, it's something we've never heard of and just want to see what will happen. It still does you some good to do a little bit of research, particularly if it is something you haven't grown before or perhaps maybe even eaten before. You're going to find out about the sunlight needs on the back of the seed packet or in the listing about the plant. Please remember, we don't live where most of this information is written. So unless you're getting some from a deep south source, and I hope you will, or unless it says specifically for your zone, full sun is often full sun in Ohio. And full sun in Ohio is not the same thing as full sun in Oxford, Mississippi. It's just not. So it's a different world. So, or anywhere else. I just use Oxford as an example today because I was thinking about Oxford.
Always thinking about Oxford.
The cats have made their way into the thing today. I should have sent my cat pictures. I didn't do that. Had no idea we were doing pets today, but
they find their way in at times.
It's always okay. It's always okay. We're not going to argue with you. You will also find on those seed packets, though, sometimes information about when to plant and planting depth. And that's a couple of other things that I just want to put a little cautionary word in your ear about. Look at the map on the back of the seed packet or in the information. It will have when actually to plant, and it's oftentimes a very wide range. It'll say March through May. Well, you and I both know that the things we plant in March and the things we plant in May are not necessarily going to do exactly the same. So you need to be aware of that. For example, yes, you can plant zinnias in March all the way through May and further into the summer, but they're not going to be sown at the same time and they're not going to grow exactly the same. So just be aware of that sort of stuff. Planting depth is a little bit sort of that way too. Most of us think about when we see a tiny, tiny seed, we just want to press it into the soil a little bit, and that's a wise idea. But sometimes the bigger seeds do need to be actually planted and covered with as much as a 1/4 inch of soil, maybe even a little bit more than that in the case of something like a nasturtium seed. So give yourself the opportunity to adjust what you're looking at based on the information that you get. That will help a lot. I really am talking about the pie chart of my life this morning, buying plants, planting plants, reading about plants, talking about plants, talking to my plants, and then this little tiny sliver of other stuff. This came from a nursery that I follow, and I was just tickled by it because it is one of those funny things that you don't realize until you're obsessing entirely that you have in fact obsessed. This is great. Good choices. Nathan's planting 25 fruit trees this weekend. Thank you very much for that. And he's got some heirloom types coming in for 8A that he likes from Baker Seeds. He does try new stuff each year too. They really do have a good selection of pretty specific information as well as very specific varieties. One of the things that I'm impressed with this year is their cucumber collection at Baker Creek. I'm thinking about Mexican gherkins. It's a really pretty little cucumber. I don't know if I have to make pickles out of it, though, and I don't much want to do that. I would really rather just eat it, but it's a very pretty one, and it's one of about at least a dozen, maybe more, particular varieties that Baker Creek is offering in the cucumber world this year. I love Armenian. I love pale cucumbers. Some of those are just delicious, and they're very watery, so you have to be aware that sometimes they need a little vinegar just to perk them up a little bit, but they have a delicious taste and also a good crunch to them when they're fresh. So try something different. My goodness, why not? Why not, huh? Somebody sent a question this week about Tomato Supply Company in Fort Myers. Had I ever been there? I have not been there, but I've certainly purchased seeds from them before with good success. I think that's where I discovered Sun Sugar, which is my very favorite of the small orange tomatoes. Beautiful plant and really, I don't know. We need another word. People say bulletproof, but plants are really not bulletproof. There's something else about it, though. It's a very, very durable plant, one that can stand up to, you would think it was made out of cardboard, except that you can eat it because it's so tough. It's a really good plant. One of the big questions is this particular year has been, what are we going to eat? We've been talking about this whole monk fruit business, trying to figure out what we're going to start feeding Lance to get a different
monk
thing.
Fruit, yeah, I've heard of that one before.
Yep.
I don't know anything about it though.
Well, it's one of the things that you are starting to find as a 0-calorie sweetener in other things.
Yeah.
And I don't find that it does have a distinct taste, but I find that they've done a pretty good job of working it into other stuff. It's one of those mager seed, I think is the name of them, compounds. They're so much sweeter than sugar that you have to be real careful because you can overuse it quickly and go, so you can't. It's like hot pepper. If it doesn't have any other flavor to it, if you're not getting the fruitiness, say, of a habanero, you're really just getting your tongue burned off. So,
yeah.
And in the case of things like monk fruit, the sweetness can actually destroy other tastes. But this particular one is one of the ones that it's a small sweet melon. It's Chinese, and it's a very, very pretty little thing. It's one of those things, though, that I have to admit, I look and when I read the labels, how much have they done to it? Can I just do this with monk fruit, or do I have to have it in this over-processed way? So anyway, that's my question on it. Breadfruit is a lot more around, because it's not used as much as an ingredient. It's one of those things that is extremely starchy and is used particularly for, I don't know, it's not a potato, but it has that kind of, it's in that family. It's that sort of starch thing. And it is used for desserts, though, sometimes, too. So we have to expand your horizons. So.
Yeah. I mean, it still blows my mind a little bit how you get, breadfruit and all that. But using it as a starch, I guess that would, what would be the mass production mindset of that? If you were what would are you talking about, cakes and things of that nature?
You
that
can, but
when they were-
it's also eaten as a pudding kind of
Okay.
thing. It's not like poi. It isn't that. It's not that dense.
Okay.
But it is. It's often. I've had it in a tart, and I've had it in others with other stuff mixed into it. It's kind of banana-y.
I like
Sorta.
banana-y. Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of, in a way.
Yeah, but other people, well, when you cook it, people do say that it smells like fresh bread. I've never cooked it myself, so I've never been in the room with it, but they will tell you that it smells like bread baking.
Gotcha.
So I don't mind that.
No, I love the smell of bread baking. Is it my favorite bakery this past week one time?
So there's a whole bunch of things out here that we just don't appreciate as much as we might, and I'm gonna work on that this year. I want us to expand our horizons a little bit. I think we should. There are a couple of things going on in this world today that are kind of interesting. It's Benjamin Franklin Day. Now, I don't know if it's, didn't look it up. Don't know if it's his birthday. Don't know if it's when he became ambassador to France. Don't know if it's when he flew the kite. I have no idea why this particular day. But I do know that when it comes to lore and it comes to history and it comes to stories, we got a lot of good ones about Benjamin Franklin. And luckily he didn't, he had a little bit too much fun perhaps in France, but other than that, I think he was pretty well represented us otherwise.
There were a lot of gentlemen that were not very happy with his presence, I think.
Well,
a lot of the ladies were, though.
I was going to say there were other people that were very happy about it, but that's another story for another day. That's a late night conversation. But at any rate, he did do an awful lot, and I think that in terms of thinking about Americans, we oftentimes have to prove our bravado because we have quite a bit of that sometimes. And in his case, he did manage to literally go ahead and do the things he said he was going to do. I mean, I have on glasses today because he said, we really could see better if we would just make these things more standardized. We wouldn't have to all carry around a little monocle like they do in Europe, So those are the sorts of things. He made a lot of practical changes for us. Put a bunch of his knowledge to work, gave us some of that knowledge is power stuff. So I appreciate that very, very much. This is also Soup Swap Day. Now, it might take us a year, but I think we could probably organize a soup swap. So maybe next year at this time, we'll be doing that particular activity. I like the idea, though, that because everybody's got one that they like or that they cook well, and then you just turn around and share that with somebody else so they can share with you the one that they do better than you do. I like that. I think that's pretty smart. Makes a lot of sense to me. There's so many different things to think about. Have you had a king cake yet? Yes. Thank you, Nathan. Yes, I have. Didn't have the donut one, but I have had king cake. I know that's making you crazy, Lance, because that's really the one that we need to have for you.
Oh, I'm a big king cake. Yeah. That one is already it's been on my mind. Donut king cake. Whew.
Come on now, that sounds great.
Oh, trust me. Yeah, I mean.
Sometimes you just
come
have
up for
to
air
read.
on that.
Sometimes you read headlines in the science world, and you almost don't want to go any farther. Now, that's true of any sort of headline, but the science ones particularly have this. Frozen poison may have sparked life. Do I want to know about that? I don't think I want to know about that.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
The secret behind James Webb's red dots. I didn't know James Webb, the telescope, I didn't know it had red dots. Okay, might have to read that one. The hidden rule of mammal aging. Well, I really don't want to know about that. So what do you think?
Oh, all of them work.
Yeah, they're all interesting things, but it's just the world is such an interesting place when we have all this work being done, and as we've noted every year in January, the research papers just start pouring out into the world so that we can all learn a little bit more than we knew already. Corinne tells us this morning she saw bags of seed potatoes. Yes, that's right. They're everywhere right now. She's in the Madison area, but they are all over the South at this point. There were 4 small seed potatoes and 1 large one. Do the small potatoes work best, or does the large one make more in the end? You know, that is a good question, and it sounds like they really sorted when they put these potatoes in here. What we look at in the winter planting is oftentimes cutting so that there's an eye in each of the chunks that you plant, which you wouldn't have to do with the ones that are small and whole, unless they have 4 or 5 eyes, and you can break them up too if you want to. But the bigger one I would certainly cut up, and I'll tell you what else I would do. I would dust it with lime, any of those cut sides, before you plant them. There's logical science behind it, but what we also find is that it helps. In other words, it helps both with the pH of the situation, but it also helps us to keep those cut sides from getting too wet if the weather happens to be real damp. It just adds another little barrier, a little effort, a little work for you there to help you get your potatoes going. So yes, I would do that. I would cut the big one up. We oftentimes think about cut potatoes in the springtime and whole potatoes in the fall for planting, but most people do plant what they can get their hands on. So I think Lance has left the building. Garcia Donuts in Laurel has an awesome donut king cake.
Head down there.
And of course, Robert
gas.
St. John's at Loblolly. I mean, come on, in Hattiesburg, of course.
You got to hit them on the
Fun
way.
stuff.
I mean, just stop at each
That's
one
right,
as we
that's
go.
I think we could put on about 30 pounds with king cake and fried chicken.
Yeah, I might need to take a bike.
Across the South.
Yeah, I need to bicycle around.
Take bicycles. You're right. But what fun.
Oh, goodness. Wouldn't it be? Yeah,
It is that time of year, though, when we think about, they'll show you calendars of the Deep South. We have festivals that go on all the time. The least amount of festivaling that we do is the middle of the summer. But you look at other places, you look at other places, and they're sitting inside waiting for the football game to start. We're not. We got stuff to do. All right, gardeners, stick around. We got to talk about a lot of things today. Love hearing from you, and we'll be right back.
Carry on.
Sometimes you'd think that we had actually talked about this program. My next story that I wanted to bring to you today, my friends, as we are rolling through these texts, y'all have got some good questions happening. Turns out that the forest loss across the world, and we know that there's a great deal of deforestation in many places, is what is driving mosquitoes' thirst for us. That's right, human beings. When the forest disappears, the mosquitoes don't. Let's just put it that way. And if you've ever been where an area has been cleared yourself, which I happen to have been myself at one time, I can tell you that the mosquito population does not decrease, and I think it actually bursts. This is very difficult. This is a disease issue. It's obviously a pest problem, and it's one of those things that we have to take into account. We have to pay attention to what we're doing. When we don't look at the consequences that we can predict, how are we going to look at the ones we can't predict? And we understand now that we're actually making a home for more mosquitoes to come and get us. That's not good. Good question, though, from Greg and Vaughn. We planted 2 peach and 2 plum trees a couple of years ago at this time of year. That's perfect. They bloom each year and have grown some, but have not yet produced any fruit. I've got some good fertilizer. When do I need to put that out, and what else do I need to do? Those are good questions, Greg. If they were young trees, which I suspect they were, it will take 4 years probably to really get fruit going. You might get some fruit in the 3rd year, but to get the tree big enough to actually sustain fruit production takes a couple of more years. I would also say that I'm sure you pruned them when you planted them, but you do need to prune each winter to make sure that you're creating a structure, a scaffold in that tree that's strong enough to support the fruit. So it's not necessarily a big pruning job. It's just making sure that you're taking out anything that is dead or damaged, anything that crisscrosses. For example, if you have 2 branches that rub up on each other, one of them needs to go. And you need to, in some cases, shorten the side branches so that they can thicken up. But that would be a matter of taking a look at that individual tree and to determine that. Then after you finish the pruning in January, it gets to be pretty close to time to start giving yourself the opportunity to fertilize. I would certainly do a a work around the soil, around the trees first, some kind of compost, maybe organic matter. Just make sure you're laying that down, and then come in with your fertilizer just pretty soon after that, because the trees are going to bloom. Gets to be middle to late February pretty quickly, and the fruit trees just are really out there doing their thing. So that's a really, you're in good shape. Do remember that you're going to have to spray 95% of the time. You're going to have to spray peaches. So pay attention to that issue and look up some information about what it might take to do. There are both traditional and organic formulations that you can take care of with that. Okay? Okay. I have two 18-inch cast iron planters. How wonderful. That's lovely. This is Kathy in Zone 8. What can I plant in them that gets morning sun and is deer resistant? Oh dear. The house blocks the afternoon sun. That's good. This is for spring and summer plantings. Well, let's see. Couple of choices that I would begin with, and that would be Powys Castle Artemisia, simply because it is a perennial. It will grow in a container. When it gets to be overabundant, you can pull it out without damaging the rest of the plant, and deer do not like it. If you went in that direction, then you would probably go on to other gray foliage things. You might even grow Dusty Miller. You might grow some of the grayish, bluish dianthus that you can put into there that they're not that crazy about. But, it is in fact true that a thirsty deer is going to come and get whatever it is. So you have to be aware of that. But I would start with Powys Castle. I would start with gray foliage. And there are a few things that they're just not that crazy about. I'm told, I know they'll eat the rose flowers off of roses, but they don't always eat the rose bushes. It depends. But I am also told that they're particularly not fond of Gerber daisies. I don't know if that's true, but I can tell you that you'll do better if you do things that are thorny, seedy, and gray. Okay. See if anybody else lets us know something else. Let's see. Oh, good. Let's see. Betty in Hattiesburg took the Birdman's advice and got a bat house. And it may take years for the bats to come, according to what she's been reading. Do you know anything I can do to make them come sooner? I didn't know it took years. The only places that I've been in the South with bat houses, it was maybe a few months. But if anybody has any suggestions for Betty, let me know. We'll pass them along. How do you get the bats to come to the house? Interesting. Good conversation to have, too. Bats are so valuable. They do so much for us. And they're speaking of the mosquito problem, they eat insects much more rapidly than a lot of other critters. We should encourage them even more. I don't know if this is from the Duh file or not, folks, but it may be. University of Leeds in the UK is letting us know that it turns out, as you would expect, that tropical forests will recover twice as fast after that deforestation. Doesn't mean that the mosquitoes will go away, but the trees can recover, the forest itself can recover more quickly if there's ample nitrogen. Now, you would think this would be true, all right, because nitrogen pushes leafy growth and pushes the whole environment to produce more. Scientists across Central America followed the forest regrowth and measured these things over decades. And what they have determined is that faster regrowth also, of course, means that there's more carbon captured from the atmosphere, so it works in its own benefit to sustain itself. This is smarter, and hopefully they won't have to rely on actual fertilizers. They can set the thing in place, get it in motion, and then it's going to go ahead and produce its own nitrogen. We're finding out more and more, of course, over the years, more and more opportunities that nitrogen will produce itself if we just set things up correctly. So I like that. It's a really good thing. Oh, good grief. How did we do this? Monk fruit, even more information about monk fruit. Interesting. Oh, yeah, this is, there's a Snoopy. I've been deeply into my Snoopy memes this week for some reason, so I sent y'all this one. enjoy life and remember, don't count the days, make the days count. And that's really the whole essence of gardening. You don't, you do have to pay attention to what day it is, but if you work every day in the garden, each one of them will lead to a better garden in the next day or the next week. And that's really all we have to do. Take a little bit better care, take a little bit better attention, and continue our efforts, and we will have a better garden this year than we had last year. How about that? See, that's why you tune into SuperTalk.tv. Not just because I have on purple and green today. Monk fruit. Now that we've got Lance persuaded that we might use this as a sweetener, I'm going to let you know that there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's so many varieties we didn't even know about until recently. There are a lot of different taste profiles. We know this particular monk fruit is Lujan Guo, which you may or may not have seen. But if you go into an Oriental market, that's how you'll see it displayed. The scientific or botanic name, excuse me, is Serratia grosvenori. That doesn't matter to you and me particularly, but it is important to know that it's a vine, it's long-lived, and it is in the gourd family. So when we talk about it being a melon, we're not kidding. It actually is in that particular group of plants. The antioxidants that we think about in terms of things like blackberries and blueberries are also very highly present in monk fruit, which is another reason why it's gotten to be so popular with folks that are trying to improve our food sources. The Journal of the Science of Food and Agriculture, my goodness, they've been really trying to figure out how this is going to help with health, and apparently they've got some good results. So I like that. Let's see. Oh, okay. I'll write that for you, Kathy. No problem. Powis Castle Artemisia. Artemisia is a perennial plant that is in the wormwood group. We think about it as sort of a one that you can literally plant and it will run up underneath everything and take a space, but it also shades out weeds underneath it. It's a very pretty plant. It has very lacy leaves. There are several different varieties of it because that are based on how the leaves are cut. So you'll find a couple of different choices, but I'll type that name in for you at the next break. Another plant that I'm looking at this week are saucer magnolias. This is one of those years when we're getting to enjoy them. The tulip tree, the saucer magnolia, Magnolia soulangeana, and all of its kin are the ones that bloom with a big, flat, open flower before the leaves come on. There's a lot of other magnolias. This just happens to be this group. They are called tulip trees sometimes. They're called cup and saucer. There's a bunch of, because it's all about that flower. It's all about how the flower is shaped. And when the old-fashioned varieties encounter the really, really freezing weather that can happen in the deep south in the wintertime, sometimes their flowers don't last but about a minute before they're frozen and fall off, and it's not a pretty sight, but you're always hopeful for the next year. The good news is there are varieties of this plant that you can purchase at garden centers that are intended to be longer in their dormancy period, and therefore they don't tend to bloom until after the cold weather is gone. So that's really a fun. It's a fun plant to know about. No doubt about that. Good choices. Holly ferns are preferred meals for Madison deer. Hellebore is another one. Apparently, I didn't know they liked hellebore. And even lamb's ears, the stachys. I would not have thought that. I would have thought they would have eaten the flowers, but not the plants themselves. So that's important to know. Very important to know. I do like the idea very much of planting in a color pattern, and in some cases, then you can put, for example, a shrub in the center of that container. If it's an 18-inch container, you would put maybe a miniature rose or a little tiny thing, some sort of even some of the smallish of the nandinas could grow there and still have something around the edge of them, but it would be a very, very full pot and not unattractive at all. So that's something to think about, something to give yourself a chance to look at. I would like to think that we are going to figure out this whole business about the monk fruit, but I don't think we're going to get it all. There's so much data in here. This is great stuff. We're looking at metabolism and inflammation. They're working on the peels. They're working on everything. Apparently, somebody said, "Look, we got a lot of this stuff. We need to figure out what to do with it." And I don't have any problem with that at all. But there's a lot of research going on with it. They studied multiple varieties because they actually are chemically quite different in the amount of flavonoids or the levels of different other chemicals that they're looking for. So it's all within that plant group, but they do vary from one to the next. So that's really interesting. It's fascinating stuff. It's a very pretty plant too, by the way. If you're going to grow things in the gourd family, you may want to give yourself the opportunity to do a little soil prep now. If you're going to grow pumpkins next summer, you may want to be thinking about that too, because you do need a big space that is well cultivated, that also has had the opportunity to get some fertilizer worked into it so that it can be really nutritious for whatever vine you're going to grow. If you're thinking about growing any of these things, you may want to consider getting those trellises up. For example, if you're growing birdhouse gourds, or you're growing loofah sponges, or you have plans to grow mirliton or any of the other in the gourd family, this is the time to work on those trellises, to work on those pergolas, to get those structures up. When else are you going to do that? You're not going to do it when the plant's already growing and fixing to climb all over your car. You got to give yourself the opportunity to do the work a little bit ahead of time. It's as we all talk about all the time, you want to go sit out in the garden in the summertime, but you got to get it fixed up in the winter so that you can sit out there in the summertime. I know that's what you've been up to, Lance. You got all that stuff going on.
Man, I always got stuff going on in the backyard, and then it gets tore up, and then you got to do it again. With Big Feet's with me here.
Well,
he finds a way to have a big time.
I was going to say that's kind of his trademark.
Yeah,
he has to tear it up.
Oh man, I can't get on to him. He has too much fun. That smile, you just got to enjoy it.
He's got your number. Yeah. All right, now we're going to talk about extreme heat and honeybees. We're going to talk about ginger plants. We might even talk about snow. Stick around. This is the Garden Mama Show. Thank you, Mr. Townsend. We appreciate you so much, always. Today, for some reason or another, the world is celebrating bootleggers.
Prohibition was repealed a couple days.
Well, yes, but that was yesterday. So why are we? But anyway, today we. I think everybody in the South has a family tale about someone who once made a little bit of extra money, perhaps engaging in something resembling this activity. Luckily, they're not alive anymore. But why do you think we call it a bootleg? Just in the same way, you got a bootleg recording of a concert, or you have a bootleg publication of a book that's not available anymore. What is all that about? It's about hiding it. It's about putting that flask in the top of your boot to come across the border with it, whether it's a book or some alcohol or whatever it was. If you're smuggling it and you have to have a place to put it, the bootleg was a place to put things. Now, obviously, this was a prohibition in America thing. That's not the first time people smuggled anything anywhere. Let's face it, human beings have always been trying to take advantage of a situation to make something work for themselves that may or may not have been exactly the right thing to be doing. But I do have to say the notion of, shall we say, flasks in places they're not supposed to be is not that unknown even to this generation. So, harumph.
The good old flask.
Harumph.
I remember when the flask was like a
That
gift.
used to be a really very hip gift.
Yeah, you get that for Christmas or your birthday, and everybody would be like, "Yeah, man, you can sneak this in the ball game."
Yeah.
No, they look for those things. Yeah, you have to have.
Of course they do.
Very creative.
So,
back in the college era.
And at one point in time, people would smuggle them onto airplanes because they didn't want to buy drinks.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah,
that
an
wasn't
airplane
legal
drink.
either.
Yeah, airplane
that
drink
wasn't
is
legal. No.
like $50 for a.
Right, but that wasn't legal either.
No.
So
bootlegging has a grand history.
I just think it's weird that that's one of those things that we're going to celebrate. Like we would celebrate, I don't know, carrot cake or something.
Pumpkin spice lattes.
I guess so. I guess. You got me on that one. I don't know. I have been thinking about getting into February, moving into rose time. I've got a couple of roses that I've just cut back and because I moved them, and now I've got some others that need to be pruned because February is coming, and that's the time to do that. So if you've got roses on the mind, I'm trying to figure out why people don't have roses on the mind. There are people that just don't like them, and that just seems like an incredible unnecessary prejudice to me. What's not to like? Okay, the thorns. Well, okay, then let's grow some that don't have thorns. Okay, well, they don't all smell good. Well, some do. I mean, it's a big family of plants, and I don't understand why you can't find at least one that you even like. The family tree is so different. It's like there's breeds that have gone across oceans and around the world. And there's others that are almost exactly the same as they were. There's the knockout roses, of course, were bred in the guy's basement in the Midwest, because he was a rose breeder, and frankly, they're not going to be slowed down. They always work to see what they can get to grow next. But I am a big fan of polyanthas, and when you go to shop for roses, you will find some. You won't find a lot because they're not a real popular group of roses anymore. I like them because they tend to be a little smaller. They tend to be maybe 3 feet tall instead of 5. And they also have lots and lots of flowers on them that, to me, are particularly lovely. That's where Clotilde Super fits in. But that's not the only one. Pearl d'Or is another beautiful, beautiful pollyanna that I think you should consider. If you're growing a low hedge, for example, of roses, those are ones to put in there because they're going to bloom a lot. They're going to be very smiling plants. And of course, if you want one that's just an individual sitting there, drive you just wild with its beauty, the fairy is in that group of plants, in that polyantha group. And they're another one, when you go to prune them, you really do have to prune harder than you might want to, simply because this plant is going to respond. And if you don't give it that, take off a third of the overall size of the plant, you end up with something that doesn't bloom as well. And that might be what people don't always like, is that you do have to take a little bit of care of some of them. So there is that. But the whole business of polyantha roses is, for me, one of the ones they're super easy to grow. They bloom a lot, and it's very difficult for you to really to hurt them in any way. So consider that group when you think about growing a few roses for yourself, or maybe you're going to give one to somebody. It makes a great gift because it's not that hard to share with someone. I've been looking at sunflowers from the Eden Brothers. Oh, Lance, there's a world of sunflowers out here for you. You got to decide, do you want them to be 4 feet tall, 6 feet tall? Do you want both? Do you want multi-flowered branching? Do you want tall stems? You know what? There's so many reds and yellows and oranges. I mean, we got brown even. There's just
give
some
them. I want
magnificent.
all of it.
You want all of it? Well, that's good. Then Eden
whole
Brothers
mix.
can fix you up.
Eden Brothers. That's
Yeah.
deal with.
There, when the newsletter this week, what you're seeing in the newsletter that the new format that we have developed has more photos, more pictures, and in this particular case, we were highlighting the seeds that I'm in favor of from these particular seed sources, and as a result, you got a whole bunch of sunflowers on this particular panel from Eden Brothers. I'm also looking at some other ones in that group, though. I'm looking at a celosia that's a little different. We look at those beautiful bright colors in the celosias, and everybody loves them for cut flowers, but we've also got some more subtle colors. And there's some subtle colored zinnias this year that I think will make a big difference as well. Johnny's has some of those. They're just enough different to be intriguing and really more fun to experiment with and see how they're going to grow. So I'm also going to be growing if you've heard me tell stories about taking my children outside in their pajamas to smell plants that bloom at night, you will be probably familiar with the Nicotiana that is Nicotiana alata. It is a white flowered, tall, real pretty little stem, and it has stunning fragrance in the middle of the night. The one this year I'm going to grow is a lime green version of that, and it's so pretty. I love this flower. It's one that it's just enough different to intrigue me in terms of its color, but it's still going to have the smell that I'm looking for. So it's just some choices, some seed choices, some ideas that you might want to consider. Check out Renee's Garden Seeds. Check out Johnny's. Of course, check out Tomato Supply in Florida, and our friends at Baker Creek and our friends at Eden Brothers. All of those are reliable sources I have used myself and I can recommend to you. And no, they're not paying me anything to say that.
No
Not that I
NIL
wouldn't
deal.
Yeah, not that I wouldn't take it if they did, but I'd be happy to work for them, but I don't happen to do that. So all over the country, though, there are short season and hot weather plants because people are getting a little bit more accustomed to that nowadays. Our varieties are spreading into other parts of the country that didn't used to grow them before.
Hey, we
Sorry,
I gotta interrupt. We had one of our listeners, Bobby from Monticello, watching your show online and noticed the background image is showing through the artwork on your shirt. Is this intentional? Of course it is.
Yes. Yes.
No, some of the greatest delights in the world are just unintentional. And
Well, I thought it would. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I
and I
love
was
it.
hopeful, but I just think it's fun myself.
that's the coolest, man. You got to wear that every day now.
Well, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We will be back because we got a lot to do. Thank you so much for your texts. Send me some more. Let's talk about your garden. This is the Garden Mama Show. Leaves are very, very waxy, so they're not going to wilt, and therefore it's not hard to root, but at the same time you have to pay attention to what you're doing. Usually what happens is they bloom in the springtime, and then they put on some new growth. And that new growth is not very tender, but it is a little bit tender. So after flowering, a few weeks later, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, that the growth that has just come on, bend it a little bit. It's going to be soft, but it's not going to be real soft. It's also not going to be stiff and break in your fingers yet. So that semi-hard or semi-soft wood is what's going to root the best in the case of an Indian hawthorn and a lot of other shrubs too. But what you're looking for is the time after the flowering happens, after the new growth starts, and give that new growth a chance to get just a little bit less than completely green, and then it will bloom. Then it will go ahead and root for you rather than try to bloom again. Now, the other thing to know about woody stems like those is that you're best off to cut them on an angle, make maybe a 4-inch cutting, not a whole lot longer than that. Take the bottom leaves off and put it into a mix of some soil, but also something like perlite, something that you can keep moist but not wet, so that it will support that stem and allow it to root. You can use rooting hormone if you like. Some people do. Some people will drench with a vermicompost. You know, there's a lot of ways to nourish that particular process. But if you will cut on an angle and you will use something that's going to be supportive but also will drain well and still hold a little moisture, you'll have better success rooting those. So I think it's a wonderful plant, one that is really fun. This particular plant, to be looking at the berries on this old tree, that looks like Nandina domestica or golden bamboo to me. They are all over the South. They have seeded themselves, but the birds have helped a lot. But we also planted thousands and thousands of them in the 20th century. So I believe that is a Nandina. If it's bothering you or if it's in the wrong place, you can always cut it down. If you've got canes that are even a foot tall, you'll have a whole new shrub in a very short period of time. But that's a great plant. Really nice. Oh, pretty cherry trees in bloom. That's nice. Lovely, lovely. I really do want to ask you a question about the whole notion of what are we going to prune and when are we going to prune it. As we look at cold weather, we're trying not to prune things to stimulate them so much as we are pruning the things that are dormant. And that's why we get into crepe myrtles. That's why we get into some of the other plants that we talk about, you know, fruit trees particularly at this time of the year, because this is as dormant as those things get. And that's really the time to prune. If we prune other times, we will stimulate new growth, and we're not actually trying to do that at this moment We're trying to shape the trees, make them into their best scaffold form, and give them the opportunity to get started for the springtime. So it's important to know what you're pruning, but it's also important to know why, so that you can do it in a concerted fashion that makes a lot of sense. Seolul. Today is Seolul. What is that? Well, it's the first day of the lunar cycle, and it is in fact Korea's traditional festival of the new year. We have an odd, the calendars that we all live by are so mixed up sometimes. In terms of the Chinese New Year, which we traditionally celebrate in the wintertime, it falls on the same day as Mardi Gras this year, which is February 17th. But today is the beginning of the lunar cycle, and it is the beginning of the celebrations in Korea that are really all about the same kinds of events. You're looking at the old year, you're looking at the new year, you're celebrating your family, you're eating a lot of good things, you're having a good time and a nice visit. But it's also important because it's a different place at which to learn, where you're going to start out with your newest resolutions, your newest year. So that's usually, the public holidays go on for 3 days, but I think the families celebrate a lot longer than that. People may go home to visit where they came from, and in some cases they just frankly have a party where they are. So that is today. It is Seolul. You want a good reason to celebrate a little bit, maybe have some good Korean food. This would be a good day for that. Very smart day. I've been looking at this whole business. Every year we're seeing more and more research into the world of pollinators in general, honeybees in particular. And in our case, overwhelming heat is real in the world of honeybees. There is what they've been studying in Arizona, for example, that there are some horrendous fluctuations of temperature inside of hives, and that it in fact can lead to population declines because the weather is just so much hotter than it has been previously. Smaller colonies, of course, would be hit hardest. You would expect that. But the whole business is, how do we deal with it? And in some cases, it is to bring more hives and make a bigger setting, a bigger colony, a bigger opportunity so that the bees have better chances to live. But in some cases, they're actually looking at ways to modify the environment a little bit. We've always, in the Deep South, if you go and look, you'll oftentimes find hives that are kind of in the shadow of a row of trees or a row of big shrubs, and some of that is to provide shade for the hives themselves. Some of it's also to provide access to the flowers for the bees. So I think this particular study, negative effects of excessive heat, it's an important thing to consider, and they'll be working on that in three-month periods of trying to figure out how they can modify the temperatures, and of course how they can keep the honeybee colonies thriving. They do cope, but when they're pushed past the point where they can cope anymore, we do lose some of them, and they don't want that to happen. Obviously, we need more and more, not fewer and fewer. I didn't know this. There are so many things that are all tied up in the way that we live in this world. The Rutgers University is one of my very favorite research institutions, and really just places. It's a very cool place. It turns out that the iron in the ocean is what actually helps to keep the oxygen we breathe going like it goes. Now, we think about iron in terms of plants. When Mark was here, we were talking about the necessity to add iron at times, and the fact that the lack of iron can restrict the availability of other nutrients, and both is the same way. Other pH situations can restrict the availability of iron. So both of those things can work together to cause you to have trouble growing a plant. In this case, though, the microscopic ocean algae are really where a lot of the Earth's oxygen comes from. And if its iron levels are not high enough, if the natural levels of iron that the world provides, that the planet provides, are not there, then we all can suffer from that. The changes, of course, reduce the amount of iron in particular areas, some in lesser places, some in greater places, but the impact of this goes to the food sources in the ocean world. For example, the marine food chains would be weakened. Iron is an essential part of the development of krill. You know, we can't if they can't eat the krill, then where are they going to go? That would lead, and then of course to fewer whales because they don't have a food source. So these are the sorts of things that the folks at Rutgers are working on. They're in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, is trying to understand how this essential process works, so that we can find more points of intersection with it. And I think that makes a great deal of sense. It is one of those things. If you don't know how it works, how are you going to figure out that it does or it doesn't? And I think that's real important. Somebody sent me a pretty picture this week of their spinach. And I was reminded that this is Popeye week, Popeye Day. But if you planted spinach in September, you really should be, you should be picking. If you've got a cloche over it, you're still making it, but you should have already picked it. It's a good crop, and it is just about time to start up again. We traditionally in the Deep South do better with spinach in the fall, but I'm not going to say don't try it, because it's a favorite. It's so high in so many good nutrients that we do need to think about eating more spinach.
We got a call on the phone this morning here from Miss Anna.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk to Anna.
She
What's
had a
going
question
on,
about
Miss
some
Anna?
pollinators or some comments about it, and also she just celebrated her 60th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Yes. So, Miss Anna,
Good
you're
morning,
on.
Anna.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Congratulations. Now I want to know. What did y'all do to celebrate?
Oh, nothing. Hey, I've been here doing it for 60 years. What's to celebrate?
I think I would have had to pull. If I had made it to 60, I think I would have had to pull out 60 and say, "Okay, it's Paris. Let's go." What's going on today?
Well, I'm studying paleobotany, and I'm researching and everything else. And here's something. You're talking about pollinators, and there's a pollinator that most people don't think about, and that is beetles. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in fact, one of our famous trees here in Mississippi is the magnolia, and it's one of the first trees that evolved as a tree.
Yes, yes.
And it evolved to have very sturdy leaves and very thick petals and a nice smell. But there were no bees. But there were beetles. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And beetles were pollinating it. And they pollinate an awful lot of stuff. Well, we know about ladybugs, they're beetles. Mm-hmm, and so when people go say, "Oh, there's a beetle on my plants, it's going to eat them." Well, it might, but on the other hand,
very seldom. The majority of them are not aggressive. So, yeah.
Right. And also, most beetles produce insects or babies which grow in the ground. So when you spray the ground, you're spraying next year's pollinators or next month's pollinators.
Yeah. That's very true.
So,
that's very true. Their life cycle is different from most of the insects that we associate with pollination. You're right. You're absolutely right.
That's true. That's true. Mm-hmm. I mean, bees came along a lot later. So, and also, don't forget, the bees, the native bees, do different types of plants than the honeybees, which aren't native.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So it's things to think about. So start researching paleobotany, and you'll find out these things.
I think it's fascinating. Speaking of old trees, what pollinates ginkgo?
Ginkgo? I don't know. Maybe
I'll bet it's a
depends
beetle.
on the smell, because beetles like the smell.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much. That's good information, and it is very important too, because too often we think of beetles, we think of Mexican bean beetles, eating our food and stuff. We don't remember that way they all have a role to play.
Yeah.
So it's important.
Well, it worked for the magnolia, or let's say the magnolia developed strength in its petals, and also its smell, and so it needed something to pollinate it.
Sure.
And beetles, we know, they eat magnolia petals.
I love that. That's so much fun. Thank you for bringing that to us today. Everybody needs to understand that there's more out there than we ever get a chance to talk about. So thank you.
That's why continuing education is a good thing.
You're exactly right. Exactly right. And you know what else, too? I was just looking, I thought about you this week. I was looking at some old photos of mine from a trip that I took up into the central part of the South. We always say the deeper and the deepest South. This is only the deep South. This was above Memphis. But the Edgeworthias that were in bloom up there were so dramatic. And it's one of those plants that I don't think we talk about enough, but you've brought it to us over the years.
Mine has got little buds on it right now.
Well, of course. I mean, it's time.
Yeah, and,
you know?
and we had that warm spell, and some of them started to open, but you could smell their perfume. Oh, it was lovely.
I love that. There's so many plants like that we don't really think about because they're not popular. But if we have a chance to hear about them from somebody like you, we get, more people will get into growing them. Thanks, Anna.
Well,
great to hear from you.
Talk to you another time.
Thank you much. Take care of yourself. Yeah, there's a lot of plants that we associate with people, and we don't necessarily, I can't talk to you about where they are, but there are native species of orchids, for example, in Mississippi that I associate with the only person that I know who knows where they are. And they're so vulnerable and so fragile that they are to be celebrated, but not walked around and not, all of those sorts of things. On the other hand, we have huge numbers of things like pitcher plants, Crosby arboretum, and across the southern prairie part of the state that other people come from countries away to come and see because they don't have them. So we really do have to just look around a little bit and see the things that we're not necessarily appreciating in order to have a better garden and really, frankly, a better time. I love the notion that you could be married for 60 years and, I don't know, not even want to go to Paris. That's pretty cool. I like that. I will say that it could easily be a different holiday, another celebration. They might find other things to celebrate, but that's okay too, because 60 years is something to be the tip of the hat, as they say. If you are in the process of making some smart choices for your garden, and of course I hope that you are, the Garden Mama Show is yours all the time. We're so lucky. We're in January. We're doing a garden show. Now, that's not true all over the world. There are places where right now you'd have to wait till March to get the chance to talk to, I don't know, my friend Charlie Nardozzi, who's been doing garden radio forever. But it's not something that in Vermont, you don't really garden very much in the middle of the winter. So he does events, but usually he's doing something else with his own garden at this time of the year. We get a chance to talk every Saturday. So I appreciate every time you tell somebody about the show. It builds our audience. It builds us and makes us a stronger group of gardeners. Each time you send me an email, mamaonair@yahoo.com, give me the chance to tell you something else during the week. When you subscribe to the newsletter, when you come to events that I have the opportunity to go and present, you really do absolutely build the community of gardeners. And that's what this is all about. We want to grow better plants. We want to grow some of everything. I can still remember having to defend that notion. What are you going to grow? You're going to grow flowers? You're going to grow vegetables? You're going to grow trees? What are you going to grow? I'm going to grow everything. What are you talking about? You can't do that. You got to specialize. No, you don't. I did specialize in flowers because I do. That's my particular love. But I always, I knew I was going to learn how to grow lawns. I knew I was going to learn how to grow trees, and I hope that you do too, because we all have a few things we enjoy, and gardening is the one we share. My goodness, that was fast this morning, Lance. You've moved the clock up. We're in a time warp.
I think so.
We need to step away, but only for a moment. We'll be right back. The more we look, the more we see. New research this week is letting us know that this is so devastating that it is being reported in the American Phytopathological Society. These guys are serious. Gals, people are very serious. This is a major cotton virus that everybody thought just showed up. No, it's been lurking. It's been hiding. It's actually been, this is the leaf royal dwarf virus, has been around much, much longer, since the beginning of this century, which is a long time to not have been discovered and dealt with. So it's interesting because the appearance in California, of course, is a big deal. There's still a lot of cotton grown there, but it's also present in some of the animal feeds that come from that particular place and environment too. So one of the things, this is the scientists working at this from the USDA Agriculture Research Association, Research Alliance, and in cooperation with the folks from Cornell University, where of course they do a lot of this kind of work too. There's the identification problem does not solve the problem, but at least now they know what they've been looking at, and it is the overlooked part that has been so disturbing to these folks. Of course, you would know that. If you don't know that you have a problem, and then you have one, you realize that it's been a problem you haven't dealt with. That's a lot more of an issue, harder to find the ins and outs of, I think, than something that literally just comes in, say, on the bottom of a boat from some foreign country. If you look, you sometimes find things. If you don't look, you don't. If you look, sometimes, like the folks did in Thailand. Now, we've talked here about cyanobacteria and the fascinating world of, well, you know, I tend to think bacteria are going to take over the world now that they can eat plastic. We're on our way to a different thing entirely. However, they have discovered a natural UV blocking compound with antioxidant power, in other words, a sunscreen. And where have they found this? In the hot springs of Thailand. Well, of course you would think so. You would think that something that could survive there would have to find a way to survive there. And in this case, the molecule is only produced under UV and salt stress, and at the same time, the way that it produces itself is a biopathway we have not seen before. So this is a beautiful new horizon. Not only is it something that we can be interested to see how the development goes, but it also gives us the opportunity to look at something as it is creating a new thing that we don't know about. Very, very cool. We might find, you know, in a few years we'll have the different kinds of sunscreens, different ones that are perhaps less allergic. People do have reactions to sunscreens and are unable to wear them in a lot of cases. So hopefully, because this one is so different, it will provide a different result. But if you didn't look, you wouldn't find it. If you don't look, of course, you don't. There's so many things you don't find. The questions in my world always go to, what is it that's working? What are we not seeing? Well, in this particular piece from Flinders University, we think about, and I say that bacteria will take over the world. The same can be said about the microbes, that the microbes well, some of them are good. And in this particular case, we're now looking at lists of ones that not only don't make us sick, but their presence keeps us healthy. And their absence can lead to less good health on our parts because we need the biodiversity of these particular microbes. So it's really very cool if you think about it. We look up and say viruses and bacteria, but at the same time, we have to have them. They fit into the ecosystem. They fit into the ecology of our lives. And in this particular case, we're focusing on the ones that are actually not threats, the ones that are boosting us, the ones that are keeping us going. I really think this is very, very important, and they're reporting in Microbial Biotechnology, in case you wanted to go and look it up and read more than I could possibly bring to you. But the emerging evidence shows that exposure to diverse environmental microbes is a better opportunity for us all to use some of them in a better way. That's pretty interesting when you think about it. Somebody sent me a note this week about starting some Chinese cabbage seeds, and they had already stretched. I have to tell you that the stretching that happens when a little seed pops up and immediately puts on a stem that is too tall and too weak to support that plant, you have got a couple of things, one of two things going on. You've either got too little light, or you've actually left the light on for too little in terms of intensity, or you've left the light on for an inappropriate amount of time. You've either left it on all the time, or you've left it on only for a couple of hours. The light is a very particular element of seed starting. So when you do that, make sure that you are both, that you get yourself a timer, first of all, because you're not going to remember when you want to go turn it on and turn it off. But if you are providing a dark period for those seeds, make sure you're really doing that. Make sure the light that you're providing goes off, but that the other lights around it are also not intruding, because that can be a problem. And if your intensity is not correct, if the level that you have the light over the plants is not low enough, that will also cause them to stretch. So be sure and measure that. You need to be 3 to 4 inches above the plants all the time and no more. Okay, so that's real important. I appreciated that question, because it's really one of those things that until you're in the middle of it, you may or may not know what you're seeing or what you're not seeing. I'm fascinated. You know, I have family members that attended University of Illinois, Urbana, and this particular Institute for Sustainability, Energy, and the Environment, one of those names of a place that won't fit on a business card, but I'm really glad that they exist. When we talk about the action of plants and their stomatas, stomatas are the things that are on the leaf surface that actually, for lack of a better word, breathe for the plant. This is why when plants are coated in dust, we tell you to dust them off. This is also why when plants are, when we see those materials they want you to spray on and make the leaves get shiny, I'm not much in favor of that, because I don't want it to clog up the stomata. The stomata do a really important job and keep your plants growing, because they keep the transfer of air, oxygen, and all of that happening at the time that the leaf needs it, because it responds on its own. So in this particular bit of work, scientists have created a new way to watch plants breathe. I've wanted to see this my whole life. I'm thrilled that they're doing this.
That's pretty cool. Huh?
This is live and in high def. How cool is this? What they're looking at is, what they're trying to do, of course, what they're trying to measure is carbon and water in the system and how it's exchanged with air, because they're trying to measure the efficiency of the growth of these plants. But in this particular case, it really will help us be smarter. It'll help us grow stronger plants. It's going to help us understand better, because we can see what's happening. And frankly, that again gives us places along the way to come in and intervene to make it work better. And in this case, tracking this particular balancing act, there's, the process itself, of course, it's a microscopic process, but it involves things valves that adjust. It involves the carbon dioxide comes in, the leaf goes into its reaction to that, and then, of course, that has to allow the water vapor to escape. I mean, the whole dynamic of photosynthesis is just fascinating and fun all in of itself. But until now, tracking that was very, very difficult. So what they did was to create a new system to make it possible to do this. And I love that they have produced a tool called Stomata Insight. They did not laugh. They did not make a joke. They just named it what they had created. So now what they're trying to understand is the implications of this information that they've gotten. How much gas goes into the leaf, how fast it stays there, how long it stays there, how fast it leaves. All of those bits and pieces of the process are going to make it a better understanding for us and help us, again, with things. If we didn't know how it worked, we can't intervene. We can't make it work better. We can't prevent it from falling apart. And in this particular case, we're having a whole lot of better success than we used to have. There used to be the Stomata Insights. I love this stuff. It's bringing together several different things that have to work for it all to work at the same time. The leaf gas exchange, of course, is part of it. You've got to be able to measure that, quantify it. And then the environmental control itself has to be also measurable. And indeed, the whole business of how these images are produced has to be worked on, because that's what they're trying to show us. So that's what we got a chance to see all of that. I think that's just wonderful. I was really fascinated to hear from in Madison that the hellebores are something that and holly ferns are something that the deer will eat, and I looked for other references to it. I actually saw one that said that they would pull the holly ferns out of the ground. I've never seen that happen, but I'm just letting you know what folks are reporting, both from central Mississippi but also from other places across the South. I do think that we have, as we move into as the deer are more collapsed in their environment, and as we tend to be surrounding them and be in their spaces, we have to really expect this. We know we're going to have more and more of the opportunity for them to come in and, well, have a bite or 10 or take something out entirely. Maybe they do lift those plants all the way out. I don't know. I have seen them eat, for example, a juga down to the ground where you couldn't even see the plants anymore. And I don't know if they were still alive or not. But they will eat things very, very sturdily all the way down to ground level if they like them enough. And that's our friends the deer. Well, that's how that works. One of the other pieces of the Garden Mama newsletter this week that I wanted to be sure I don't forget to tell you about is the difference in growing cherry tomatoes and standard size tomatoes in terms of the plants. I have said on many occasions, and I'm not the only one, that cherry tomatoes are a lot easier to grow. They are more responsive. If you plant 10 seeds, you'll have 9 come up, if not 10 or 11. They're very, very fast to germinate, and they also grow faster than I find things like beefsteaks or even something like Celebrity, which is a determinate tomato. If you want to grow determinate tomatoes, you still need to plant them in the wintertime for transplant to the garden when the weather warms up. It's just because they're not going to be as tall doesn't mean that you have more time to plant them. And I want to encourage you, if you want to grow things from seed, to get yourself together with it. I know some of you are tired of me saying it, and other people are saying they're still not listening. Both things are probably true. I think it's important. Somebody asked me if you could still plant onions. I don't see why not, especially if you're just going to grow some for green onion shoots, something to pick. I might not. I don't know about planting onion sets to grow into full-size onions at this time of the year. I tend to think that it's the soils are wet and heavy and cold, and the onion may or may not make it. But let me know if you do it and it works. Let me know. I'd love to see. I would love to hear about it. We have also been. I got a note in my text line this morning from somebody about that they didn't like that particular gherkin that I was talking about, the Mexican cucumber, but they do grow the classic old pickling cucumbers and make pickles. Well, what kind of pickles do you make? We can talk about that here in the next few weeks as we're getting ready to grow things, because that is one of those things that everybody's got a particular point of view about. I tend to like several different kinds of pickles, but I don't like them all, and you probably don't either. So we'll see if we can't get some folks to weigh in on whose pickles are the better pickles and which ones we should actually be eating when it comes down to it. There are always questions about what are we going to grow and what are we going to do with it. But I'm going to tell you something. While you're pruning, go ahead and root some figs. You're going to prune off those edges. You may as well root those. But give yourself the chance to clear out a little bit. Like I said, leave some things. But if you're pruning, you don't need to leave a pile of prunings on the ground. Your pollinators already have other places to live. But give yourself the opportunity to really see what you're doing and understand, take a picture before, take a picture after. Give yourself all of those qualities, because that's going to make next year even that much better. Jeff in Carrollton, when should I plant my tomato seeds? Oh, we'll talk about that indoors this month or in February. Well, you're in Carrollton. I'm probably not going to be putting those out until late March, but we'll talk about that. Stick around. This is the Garden Mama Show. Now, for those of you who hadn't noticed, lots of the James Webb telescope images have red dots in them, and now we know why.
It's aliens.
They are. You were hopeful. I know you were hopeful.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Let's see what these things look like.
They're actually newborn black holes, and they're fiery. They're flaming. That's why we're seeing them like that. They literally look like dots that you would back when the cameras would produce red eye. Some of that they had that sort of a look to them. But in fact, it's a really violent era and nasty, apparently, from the point of view of the black holes themselves, because it tears them up. But it's University of Copenhagen that has found that out for us, so we have them to thank for that bit of information. You ever ask anybody why the trains don't run on time, and there's always an explanation? At the coral reef, there's no answer, because they do. That's right. The coral reefs have their own timetable, and you and I don't have anything to do with it. You and I can't mess it up, apparently, even when the health of the reef itself is not as we would want it to be. We have got an awful lot of opportunity to see it. We're actually working. The microscopic life in the nearby waters act based on the signals from the coral reef. Now, that can sound fanciful to you. It can sound crazy. It's not. The Hebrew University of Jerusalem has just put this all together. What they have literally found is that the microbial populations are shaped by feeding, by what's trying to eat them, by what they're trying to eat, by everything else that's going on and how the coral grows. All of these things affect it. Some of them peak in the daytime, some of them peak at night, but they are consistent, and they are what keeps the reef growing and what keeps the reef going, because the microbial action around it obviously has a huge impact on the environment that the coral is living in. I think this is cool. The coral actually do more than support the fish. They actually organize the daily timetable of microscopic organisms. They're running the train. I love that. I think it's so important. Jeff in Carrollton, when should I plant my tomato seeds indoors, this month or February? Well, in Carrollton, I'm going to say that you want them to be ready for the garden at the end of March. So you got to work back 4 to 6, sometimes 8 weeks, and I'm going to say 8 just because I want you to have big plants. That means you would want them to grow through the entire month of March and most of February. So if you haven't ordered your seeds, hurry up and do that. If your setup isn't ready, hurry up and do that. And you certainly have time before that to start some seeds for some cooler season crops. But yes, you need to go ahead and get ready to start those seeds, whether it's tomatoes or peppers or even eggplants. If you're going to do those, they need to be ready in Carrollton. They need to be ready for the end of March, and that's you may not get to plant right then. The weather may be too cold, but if the plants are ready, then you're ready. So I think that's wonderful. If you are in an area that is difficult to find seeds or difficult to find plants, sometimes that's why you would grow from seeds. On the other hand, there's other folks that just want to try something different, and I suspect that's the case with Jeff. He grows so many different things that I'm not surprised. Really interesting. Really fun stuff. I know that there are a lot of plants that are frankly not looking all that great in your areas. Probably, everybody's got a choice of one to pick on. I've been noticing the gardenias. They're kind of yellow. They're not particularly healthy, happy looking. Don't go pruning those. This is not the time of year to mess with that. Same thing is true of something like an evergreen. You may be looking at Photinia, you may be looking at Clayera, you may be looking at other evergreen shrubs that just don't seem to be at their best right this minute. That's okay. It's wintertime. Leave them a little bit messy, let them stay like they are, let their leaves fall off, and then when we get into February, we can look at whether or not we need to do some work on them. If we're going to rejuvenate shrubs, for example, like a ligustrum or some other evergreen, we do that in February because we want to push new growth. And then in turn, we want to push more growth in the summertime. But right now, it's time to take care of the ornamental grasses, take care of your fruit trees, and of course, take care of those crepe myrtles. If you're pruning, if you haven't pruned them yet, I can see my list is growing as well. You probably have a whole lot to do. It's time. And it's also time, don't forget your oil sprays. We don't want to wait until the temperatures get warmed up again to realize that we never did spray for the insects. And if you've got camellias that have finished budding, or finished flowering, I should say, you can spray them too. Your sasanquas undoubtedly have finished by now. You can certainly spray them. And you want to do that. But you also want to get yourself into the hollies and the gardenias if they need to be oil sprayed with your ultra-refined horticultural oil. This is the time to do that. and it's a good time to do that. I have heard prune pampas grass anywhere from December to March. When should I do this? Daryl's in Laurel. The reason people say that about pampas grass is because sometimes it takes 2 or 3 efforts to get out there and prune it. It's such a really big, nasty grass. But the sooner the better. Once the plumes have filled out and are completely, sending out their little tiny flowers everywhere, you're going to notice that the new growth will start maybe 3 or 4 weeks later coming from the inside of that clump. So that's why we want to go ahead and prune before you can see the green coming, or when it's very, very far down inside the clump. So go ahead and get that pruning started now, because it really doesn't get any closer to time. They'll start growing again in February, certainly in Laurel, and you're going to want them to be pruned before that. There are a lot of things like that if we don't get going on the pruning, suddenly we're late. And next week I'll begin talking more in earnest. I talked about polyanthus today, but next week I want to talk more about rose planting and getting rid of some of the other issues that we have. For example, we talk about roses that just don't perform. Why are you keeping them? It's just a plant. Well, we'll talk about what you want to replace and how you want to do that, and sometimes maybe even ways to rejuvenate some things along the way. The roses are a big part of that in February. We've also got a lot of things going on in the grow part. We're back around. Did you know that lettuce has gone up by 40% in its price at the grocery store? Well, if you're not growing lettuce, you probably want to be. So whether you grow traditional lettuces, this is a good time of year to even grow head lettuces, if you like those. But semi-heading lettuces are really easy to grow, and this is the time of year to get those started again. You're back to listening to me tell you that you want a cloche, and I hope that if you don't have one, you get out there and build one, because this is the perfect time to be balancing out growing with protecting. We do both of those things at this time. I'm going to have to tell you, Lance, I appreciate all your hard work today. Thank you very much for being there. Loved hearing from our friend Anna, and I feel confident that Hawk is actually taking everything over in there today. Y'all are going to be busy all day long.
He's always busy, yeah. He's bouncy and squirmy and slinky.
He's got a lot to do.
And he loves seeing Buddy when Buddy shows up, too.
Sure.
He loves Buddy.
Of course. That's great. Y'all are really fun today. We've been propagating, we've been admiring, and we've also had the opportunity to talk about what the deer will eat. So if you got more things you want to add to that list, I'll put together a more formal one of what they're fond of and what they're not so fond of. Send that to me, mamaonair@yahoo.com. Y'all take care of yourselves. Have a good week. We'll be here next week. Come on back then to the Garden Mama Show.